so far as I know, at least last time I saw statistics, is at an all-time low.
Yeah.
So most of the preachers in the country are probably talking to 20 to 75 people on a given Sunday morning.
75
maybe.
is actually the average.
Is it?
Yep, it is.
See, I just pulled that out of my butt and got it right.
You got it exactly right. Yeah.
But so when we talk about these things, they're in it for the money. Not only is that false in most cases, but we're making a claim about what their motivations are. And anytime you start to pretend that you can get into somebody's head to say they're lying, they're intending to deceive, they're in this for the money, you're making a claim now that you have sussed out something about their actions that tell you what their inner motivations are, and you better be able to make a case for that. And it's, I've had disagreements with people. They're like, well, do you think Ray Comfort's lying? Well, about what? I mean, there are things that he has been exposed as misrepresenting. Mm-hmm. But is he lying about what he actually believes? I have no reason to think that, and I'm willing to take him at his word. Yes, but he's had this stuff explained to him so many times, and he just keeps saying the same thing. He has to be lying. No. The only requirement for him to keep saying that is to not understand or not agree with what has been explained to him.
Well, interesting that you say that, because after your debate with Cy, which, by the way, my daughter said, Dad, I think I know why people call him Cy. Yeah. She said she was in the front row of that debate, and I laughed and then said, please tell me why. And of course she followed with, because every time he talks, I just want to go, and I thought it was the cutest thing ever. So after that debate, I had him and Eric Hovind on stage together. Now, Aaron used to be on the show. Mm-hmm. Aaron used to constantly call Eric Hovind a liar, mm-hmm. and I would defend Eric and say, no, I think he's really fundamentalist Christian. I don't think he's lying. Well, that day, he's on my show. I look right into his eyes. I call him out on a very specific thing, which he talked about, that Jupiter is losing its heat some faster than it's gaining or something. And I said, you quoted this line in this scientific journal, and I showed it to him, whatever it was. I told him what it was. He said, okay. And I said, the very next sentence says, but it generates its own heat. And you intentionally left that out to make your point that the Earth isn't, that the universe isn't that old. And he just went, okay. Mm. And now I've changed my mind. I think Aaron was right that Eric is either completely lying or just assumes that the end justifies the means.
You may have made a case for an instance where somebody was intentionally, knowingly being dishonest. Yeah. My objection isn't, like if you or anybody else says, oh, this person is lying. My point is, okay, you need to actually demonstrate that there's this here. Because, for example, there's a gentleman on YouTube who we have a disagreement, and I'm not going to name him, but it's about slavery.
Is he the one that I asked you about because he was trying to be on my show and you said avoid it at all costs?
I don't know. I don't remember who that was. Anyway.
Okay. We'll talk about it off air.
It was about slavery. And so I went through and basically did a 30-minute video where I pretty much read the Bible and put the words up on the screen to show this is what the Bible says. And in a response to me, he reads verse 20 and stops and then asks me a question as if it's a stumper when that answer is in verse 21 or something like that. I might have the numbers off slightly, but it was literally, if he hadn't stopped reading, he would have got there. Now, there's a number of things that could have happened. Number one, we might have a disagreement about what's in the next verse as to whether or not it answers his question. Mm-hmm. He might have subconsciously read it and something in him stopped him from reading it because, oh no, this is going to expose me. I don't know, because I've been a magician for my entire life. I do a lot of mentalism on stage. I pretend to read people's minds all the time. I can't actually read people's minds. So until I can demonstrate that he was actually being dishonest, all I can say is what he did was problematic, wrong. Here was your answer. I don't know what your motivation was. That's the key thing. I want us to stop asserting motivations. The argument I had with my wife ages ago, when they say things like the religious right just want to punish women for having sex, or the religious right just want to control women's bodies, that may be true, but you can't make that case. Because you can't say what's in their heart. When I was in their mind, when I was held these same positions against contraception and abortion and all these things, my view was not, I want to punish women for having sex or I want to control sex. No, I had some other motivation for it. And so what you should say instead of, this is what they want to do, say, they want to impose policies that have the effect of controlling sex or have the effect of punishing it, and that is not a sufficient reason for them to stop it. So now you're talking about, not what they want to do, but what they're actually doing.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So Ryan Bell just sent me a text. He's listening.
Hey, Ryan.
He said, ask Matt about Boghossian's idea that faith equals pretending to believe what you know isn't true. Now, he's talked to Peter about it directly, and I've talked to Peter about it directly. We've had some really good conversations, and Ryan may actually be calling in. But what is your take on that?
I haven't actually talked to Pete about this. So that's actually a paraphrase of Mark Twain's kind of glib thing. Faith is believing what you know ain't so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of different definitions and usages of faith over the years. When I define faith to the extent that I do, I say that faith is the excuse people give when they believe something and don't have a good reason. Because if you believe something and have a good reason, you give the reason. And in every other instance, you offer something that is faith.
Yeah.
And that's why I have a problem with names like reasonable faith and stuff like this, because when we get down to brass tacks and talk about it, they're like, well, you have faith in things. Well, under the definition that I'm using, I don't, or at least I don't want to. I want to scrub that out because I want to have good reasons for my beliefs. But you have faith that the chair you're sitting in, isn't going to give way and let you fall to the ground. No, I have a confidence based on what I know about chairs and my weight and gravity and everything else. I'm not asserting that this chair is absolutely going to hold me, and certainly not forever. I'm doing basically what Hume advocated, which is apportioning my belief to the evidence.
In Boghossian's book, A Manual for Creating Atheists, he mentions that he has yet to find a way where you couldn't replace the word faith with the word hope. Do you see that being a good way to say it, that when believers talk about what they have faith in, they're really talking about what they hope to be true?
For that particular context of the use of faith, yeah, but I think that's kind of trivial.
Well,
we talk about faith as like the Christian faith. I mean, so there's other usages of the word.
Well, and that's
Right.
that can be a necessary condition without being a necessary and sufficient condition. So even if that's true, it doesn't follow that that's what it reduces to.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was going to add something else about that. I don't know if you heard about this, but Boghossian got on radio with an epistemologist, a very prominent epistemologist named Timothy McGrew, and they had a debate on the meaning of faith. And I feel like this puts the nail in the coffin there, because they ended up doing a poll, which the atheist listeners took and the Christian listeners took, and it was really neat that they did it on both ends. But the question was, when Christians use the word faith, do they mean something in the absence of evidence? I don't remember exactly what it was. And all the Christians were responding saying, no, that's not what we mean. And all the atheists said, yes, that's what the Christians mean.
That is very interesting.
And the reason I think a lot of us think that is because, and I think Mark Twain was quipping on this actual verse, Hebrews 11:1, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Yeah, faith is the evidence,
right,
instead of faith in or faith about the evidence.
Right. So in other words, it's, believing what ain't so. That's what that verse reads to me to indicate, but I could be wrong.
Not to keep pushing back to my things, but I also have a 30-minute video that covers faith and how it's used and what I think about it. But anyway.
So whenever Christians say to me, I have Christian faith, I go, do you have the kind of faith that's in Hebrews 11:1? Because that, to me, is what the Bible says is faith.
Well, yeah, I mean, so that's fits in with hoping, so it has to be like a future tense thing. I do actually think that, like, someone who jumps out of an airplane, for instance, can have faith in their parachute and simultaneously have very good reason.
Right.
They haven't seen the parachute. They haven't seen it do it yet.
Right.
They have faith that it will.
But that's inductive logic, right? Like, usually parachutes come out of the backpack. We know that by inductive logic. And there's probably even a statistic affiliated with it. Like 99.999% of the time that happens.
Sure.
But if we read the verse carefully, faith is the substance of things hoped for. In other words, you hope something to be true, and your substance for that hope is faith, and it is the evidence of things not seen. In other words, stuff that can't be detected by sensory experience. To me, that indicates...
So faith becomes the evidence,
well,
according to that.
I mean, the NASB, I don't know what translation you're using.
I was looking at the King James 2000, but I can also look at other versions.
Yeah, and look at the NASB. I think it says the conviction of things
The
not
New
seen.
American Standard Bible?
Yeah, that's a better
Faith
translation.
is, okay, that's fine. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for,
Yeah,
the conviction of things not seen. Either way, you're still basing your faith on a lack of solid evidence.
Well, so just to back up, yeah. So it's it's something that's not seen, and it's something that you have a conviction of, and so you can have faith that your parachute's going to open on the basis of evidence.
But I don't think this is describing a parachute situation.
I don't think the parachute situation is actually accurate because, granted, I haven't actually jumped out of a plane.
Me neither.
But I know people who have, and they don't have a level of confidence that their parachute is going to open that is not supported by the evidence. Basically, they're not saying, "Oh, my parachute's absolutely going to open." They're going to say, "I've got all this evidence that I packed it correctly, did this. I know about physics. We know about this has happened so many other times.
Exactly.
I have this level of confidence, which is we're back to Hume. They've apportioned their belief to the evidence, and there's no faith there because they don't believe beyond the evidence. And when you talk about the existence of God, if we had a reliable track record of God appearing and doing things to the extent that we do for parachutes opening, well, then all of a sudden you could say you had a reasonable belief in God. But absent that, it seems to be that's what the faith claim is.
Well, I mean, so that would be, in the way that you just put it, it would be question-begging because you framed it in such a way that faith just is what is lacking in your evidence. And that's what I'm saying, I'm suggesting is not what faith means and not what Christians mean. I think you can have faith on the basis of evidence. So faith, I think, is more of a synonym for trust. And in the Greek, by the way...
But I think this is a equivocation fallacy.
Let me finish this real quick, and then you can do it. So, I mean, in the Greek, that's what faith means. It's just trust. And when you think about it, like, the apostles clearly had faith, and yet their faith was very well founded in Jesus' appearing to them. So that's not what Christians mean when they say faith.
I thought it came from the Latin "la fierde," which meant like trust or bona fide. It's where we get words like, this is the real deal, this is something I have trust in. In that respect, I understand that way of meaning faith. But the Bible verse you just read, it's like things that I don't know are true. No, that's my conduit there.
Things I haven't seen means things that haven't occurred yet. So it's something that hasn't happened yet. It's future tense.
Okay, well, Ryan Bell's actually on the line. I want to get his take on this. Hey, Ryan, how have you been?
Hey, man.
Hey,
Thanks
Ryan.
for taking the call.
Well, hey, great question. Why does this argument bother you so much?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to send you down a separate rabbit trail. I mean, you were talking about atheist argument, Christian arguments that are bad, and then you switched to talking about atheist arguments that are bad. And I actually don't have a problem. I mean, I've given sermons when I was a pastor about faith being sort of the God of the gaps kind of thing. In fact, I have a good friend of mine who says, Christians are far too aggressive in denying the God of the gaps thing. But my concern about Boghossian's argument is the word pretending and the word know. So, I mean, he's saying that faith for Christians is pretending to know things that you know aren't true, that you know aren't true. And I don't know any Christians personally, and I know quite a few, that are pretending at that level. And I just think it's dishonest to impute, as Matt was saying before, the motive of that kind of pretending to people.
So what you're doing then is you're accusing them of being deceptive intentionally, instead of saying they just actually believe it.
Yeah, I'm with you on there. Yeah.
So, I mean, totally separate from what faith means and how Christians use the concept, because I think they use the concept in both the trust, in the pistis kind of capacity, but also in the sort of evidential capacity. I mean, I think faith does, heavy lifting in both of those regards. But totally separate from that, I think my concern to Peter was, I much prefer his other definition of faith, which doesn't involve the motivation of the faithful.
Is it the one that talks about hope?
Yeah, no, it's the one where he says faith is an epistemology. Like I think that Christians do use faith as an epistemology.
Okay,
and I think the only way Christians use faith, but it is a way.
Yeah, I would agree. It's not the only way. So the word has lots of different usage. And a lot of it's going to depend on who you're talking to and how they're using it. Because we'll say things like, take it on faith, or this is faith-based, or I have faith, or I have faith in, or faith that. And there's a difference between believe in and believe that.
Right.
And when it comes to faith, though, I'm trying. This is why I came up with my kind of definition, which is faith is the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have a good reason. Because if you ask me, why do you believe this? I'm never going to say, because of faith, or I have faith, or I'm not going to mention faith at all. I'm probably not going to spend much time mentioning trust.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to say is, I'm convinced of this for these reasons, and these reasons are the basis for my confidence level, my trust, which is somewhere less than absolute certainty, because I think absolute certainty is unattainable.
So whenever theists tell us we have faith in science or we have faith in things like that, how do you respond to that? Do you just change the word to confidence and say no through inductive reasoning, XYZ, or deductive reasoning, XYZ?
I tended to say, look, that is not my understanding of the word faith. I would rather use trust or confidence, because I think that's much more clear and talks about, I have this for these reasons.
Okay.
And I do it to distinguish between faith, because I see this as an equivocation. Because when people say, I have a faith-based belief in the supernatural versus I have a faith-based belief that this chair will hold me up, we're definitely not talking about the same thing. Yeah. When we're using the same word. And so I think there needs to be a distinction.
Okay. Ryan, any final thoughts?
No, that's good. I mean, I think that's really important. I mean, we use words to distinguish between things. And so when we're just playing language games to deceive each other, that's not useful. So I actually don't care which word a person uses, as long as we can come to some kind of agreement about what the word means in this particular conversation, and then use it that way throughout the rest of the conversation.
Yeah. I think there's two distinct concepts.
Or if you want to say faith, I really don't care, as long as when we're talking about it, we're both talking about the same thing. So I appreciate what Matt's saying, of course.
Yeah, and I only care to the extent that there's a lot of baggage. So one of the things, if you use faith, it seems to legitimize one version of faith by pointing to another.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and when a Christian equivocates about changing from the word faith to another word, it does kind of, for me, it makes me wonder why that word is so important. Can't we just say trust or confidence? And most of my Christian friends are happy to talk about confidence based on their past experiences, or confidence based on the evidence that they have in their own life, or whatever their reasoning is. So, it's a slippery word.
All right, Ryan, thanks so much for the call, and thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, man. Talk to you later.
All right, bye-bye.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Ryan was actually, when he first started his Year Without God, I was like one of the first people who sent him an email, or one of a handful, because I had a problem with his whole I'm going to try out atheism for a year, and I'm not entirely without ego.
Yeah.
And so I was like, there's no way this sucker's going to try out atheism. I don't even buy that. That's just a boneheaded way to put. So I sent a message to him, and I'm like, if you're really going to try this out, come to Austin, stay in my guest room, live with me for a little while, see what my life's actually like, come with me to the show. And he agreed. It didn't actually happen because we had conflicts. And as it turned out, we're now friends, or at least very, very friendly. And hopefully one of these days we'll have this conversation about what may or may not have been different about that if it had happened.
Yeah. Any other arguments on the Christian side that you want people to stop using, Blake?
I remember a debate that you had with Matt Slick, and he uses a tag argument that I'm not a fan of. So I don't remember.
But there are other tag arguments that you are?
There are. In fact, I've long...
Nice one, Matt.
Wait, I missed it. Well, no. Oh, actually,
that makes it better.
I will. Yes, there is one that I came across that I think is
Can we not
better.
do it today?
Yeah, let's not do it today. But so I would hang out in Matt Slick's chat room. Like, that's where I started kind of doing apologetics, and I never liked Matt's tag argument, and that would come up in the chat rooms, and he wasn't a big fan of that.
One of the frustrating things for me with Matt, and people were like, oh my gosh, after you left that debate, they just sat around and talked smack about you for the next 20 or 30 minutes about, and I was like, I don't, there's nothing I can do about that. I don't care. But when he had called into the show, at that time, I had gone, he called in one week when I wasn't there and presented tag, and it was a mess of a discussion. And they said, well, why don't you call back in next week and talk to Matt? Well, I had gone to Carm, carm.org is his ministry website. and I had printed out his version of tag, and I went through it, and I had an objection in a different place than perhaps a lot of other atheists did. And so that's what I wanted to address. So we had this conversation. I pointed out what I thought was wrong. He invented this Dillahunty fallacy, which he persists in talking about to this day, even though I've demonstrated, I think, to everybody else that it's not actually a fallacy. Mm-hmm. And then the funny thing was he went and edited the version that he had on his website in an attempt to try and fix what I had pointed out. I think. I'm assuming motivations there because I don't know why else he would have. In any case, I have the version that I was objecting to after we had the discussion that what it was on his website changed. And because he didn't agree with me and didn't quite understand the objection I was raising, it actually made it worse.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, oh, I'm changing this. And I was like, wow, that's actually worse. Well, the funniest thing about the whole interchange between Matt and I on that was he was talking about how the laws of logic are either physical or conceptual, that this is a dichotomy. And I was saying, I don't necessarily accept that this is a dichotomy. If you want to say physical or not physical, boom, dichotomy.
Good, right.
If you want to say conceptual and not conceptual, boom, dichotomy. If you say these physical, conceptual, and he's like, well, what's the third option? And I was like, well, I don't necessarily have a name for it.
Yeah, you don't have to.
And that's the Dillahunty fallacy that he came up with, is asserting a third possibility without having a name for it. And it turns out that the name is right in the argument, transcendental, because it's transcending these two things.
Okay, there you go.
But somebody went on his website and said, okay, Matt, if everything is either physical or conceptual, which one of those is God? Right. And he said neither, which is what he criticized me for.
And in fact, it's not just God, but you can also say angels are going to be neither. And yeah, I mean, here's the thing is, if he wants you to explain the laws of logic, another thing that you can bring up is that the laws of logic are generally understood to be a special kind of proposition.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that propositions are Platonic entities that exist necessarily.
And they are not.
And well, no.
I have no good reason to think they are.
Yeah, well, people disagree. So, but if you're one of the people who thinks that propositions do exist necessarily, then you can make this other move and say, look, necessary facts don't require an explanation, which I pointed out in the debate. Like 2 + 2 = 4 doesn't need an explanation. It's usually only contingent facts that are supposed to have the explanations.
Well, 2 + 2 = 4 is true. Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I can't hear myself.
We hear you.
There we go. 2 + 2 = 4 is true by definition, because the definition of 2, the definition of 2, and the definition of 4 and plus and equals all have very specific meanings. So
I don't agree with that, but even if that's the case, I mean, that's okay.
That's
so
okay.
You're saying, yeah.
I'm a nominalist,